Beirach. Welcome back to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Hey man, it's good to be here. How you doing?
Well, I really loved your attitude and your fearlessness and your approach, because a lot of the musicians that I've talked to, they love Stan, but they didn't necessarily always want to talk out of school. I had to sometimes force them a little bit, but in general, I mean, this is the reason I want to. This is a huge part too, and I wanted you to, as best you could, talk about and personalize it to your family, because the Stan thing, I mean, his roots were Russian Jewish gypsies, okay? And I want you to talk about, where you talked so eloquently about Stan's genius and his hauntedness and what he struggled with, and I want to know how it ties back to that Russian Jewish gypsy indigenous. That's where the bloodlines were from.
Yes. Well, first of all, I am Russian Jewish also.
That's why I'm asking.
But
I know.
Yeah. And I felt very connected to Stan, even though he was way older than me. And there's something in the Jewish-Russian stock. It teaches you to be very self-reliant and very proud. Never apologize, never explain. And always to, even if you don't feel it, to give the appearance of being in control, and sometimes even in authority, which could be great if you're a leader, which he was, and he was absolutely fantastic on the bandstand. There was never a moment when he was faltering. Like when I was playing with Chet would sometimes get so scared or get sick or just, say, Richie, help me. That was a whole different kind of aesthetic. But Stan was in control, and it all came from his confidence with his horn. Stan was a natural musician. He studied a little bit, but he's complete natural genius. Very much like Mozart, very much like Schumann, Clifford Brown. But he was not a late bloomer. He was an early bloomer, like Tony Williams.
But I want you said something very. I want to ask you a question. You said something about this need, even with authority, to always seem self-assured, never seem.
Yeah.
Can you relate that at all to his, like when he was with Teagarden? I mean, he was petrified. I was talking to a psychologist who was Dizzy Gillespie's stepson, who, he was having panic attacks, and Stan was on the couch with him one day, and Stan was like, when I went on the road with Teagarden, I was scared shitless. These guys were older than me. They bullied me.
Oh, yeah.
Listen, most of them were guys that they were not the best musicians, because the best musicians went off to the war. But just going back to that Jewish-Russian heritage, how do you think that played into his early career and maybe his cutting, basically trying to hold up against trying to hold his own when he was only in ninth grade?
Yeah. The thing was, his father taught him not to show fear, and under any circumstances. And it's amazing that he actually talked to that shrink, but these were different kinds of guys. These were different men from a different generation, They came up very hard. And Stan was not intellectual. He didn't know where his talent came from. The problem with prodigies is that they never have a childhood. And because they're really like grown people in children's bodies, and it's so great. Oh, it's so great. But sometimes they burn out or go crazy. Stan had all kinds of fears. He never showed it, especially with those older cats. You show you're afraid, they're bullying you, and then the next thing is you're a pussy and you're out of the band. It was a hard school. Same shit happened to me with Sonny Stitt. I was at a jam station. No, I was playing with Stan, and Sonny Stitt came in.
Sure.
And Stitt took over like he was the leader, and Stan loved him, and Stitt trained Stan, right?
Right.
So Stitt comes up on the bandstand and says to me, I'm playing with Al Forster and Ron McClure, okay? And he says, all things you are. First note, F sharp. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Just like that. Just like that. And Stan is smiling, right? We're all smiling. Now, luckily, Stan trained me how to do that. This was like, okay, corral, go for your gun. And he said, these old cats, they, it's like a family that passes on abuse. Who knows what Bird did to Sonny Stitt or Lester Young or Papa Joe, those old guys, right?
Right.
So they feel like that's part of like hard school training, and they're really helping you. Like in the military, in the SEALs or Special Forces, there's a saying, it says the more you bleed in training, the less you bleed in combat, right? It's like basic life shit. So Stitt was going crazy on us, but I was prepared. I knew how to play that tempo. I could burn, and I knew the tune in every key. Because guess who taught me? Stan, right?
Absolutely.
So, and then we're burning, and I played a solo, and I looked right at Stitt when I was playing, and then he started to smile. He liked it. Then we're friends. But you have to pass this shit. It's terrible. I never do that to my kids, to my students. I would never.
I mean, this is so important, though. I mean, how much of that is you nailed it. It was a different kind of upbringing. It was I mean, in some ways, Stan was prepared for this okay corral mentality because of his gypsy Jewish upbringing. I mean, first of all, his father.
Absolutely.
I think also just because you're not. His dad was kind of not a flunky, but he struggled. It was Goldie, his mom, who kicked his ass. That's who instilled.
Right.
That's who instilled in him to be fearless. But I just want to know, because with those bebop guys, I mean, I talked to Ron Carter last week. He gave credit to Stan to get into the ring with the guys who made the music, like
yes.
like Stitt and Diz, he, and it was interesting. Again, it was this black. He was very clear that it was black music, black American music, but yet,
absolutely, those Norman Granz tours, Jake, those Norman Granz tours that had Stan and Coleman Hawkins and Sonny Rollins, and then they had Buddy Rich on drums and Stan. It was like a basketball team with two white guys. You know what I'm saying? And they came up. Yeah, think about Larry Bird and Havlicek with all the other motherfuckers, right?
Right.
Anyway, it was a different time, and these guys came up hard. Now I have to say that Stan did not abuse me on the bandstand. He was not like that. He did it in the room, right? He would do it after. But those old cats, they did it right on the bandstand. If you weren't playing right, or they didn't think that you were doing the right shit, or they just thought that you needed a kick in the ass, they would tell you right on the microphone. You know what I'm saying? And believe me, it's a very hard way to learn. My father taught me how to swim. You know how he taught me how to swim?
He just threw you in the deep end.
He took me to the deep end, threw me in. My mother was saying, "What are you doing?" He said, my father said, "Shut up. She's going to learn."
Right. I mean, this is so. I mean, I'm teaching my second daughter how to swim, and that would be. I mean, I'd probably go to jail for child abuse at this point. You know, I mean, it's
I know.
Go back. So you were, even though you were younger than Stan, could have been your uncle or father. In some ways, he was your older uncle. I remember in the first interview you said he was like my uncle, or your one of
Yes, he was.
But I mean,
he was not a father because he was too man to man. We would talk about drugs, we'd talk about girls. I mean, I never talked about that stuff with my father until much later. I was too scared or uncomfortable. And by the way, so was he. My father landed on D-Day, so he's a different generation. But Stan, also, after a while on the bandstand, we're comrades, we're brothers. It's not like I'm little Richie and he's great Stan, because I'm his piano player, and I make him sound good. So he needs me. He cannot fuck with me in that way, because he needs me, and that, it's one thing at a jam session. You get in, you go, you burn out, and you go home. You lick your wounds or you feel happy. But I was with him for 3 years. You know what I'm saying? We had to live together. So he didn't want that stress. He was great on the bandstand. And plus, it brings me back to my own teacher, because you said you wanted to talk a little bit about my background on this.
Absolutely.
I started playing when I was 5. I had an amazing teacher. He was 60 years old. He was Sicilian from Palermo, James Palmieri. And I met him in the local music school, and I couldn't read music. I couldn't do shit. but I knew he was cool. He was like short guy, completely bald hair, in this local Brooklyn music school on fucking McDonald Avenue and East Second Street and Avenue P, right? And I went there, and I just knew he was cool. He had a beautiful blue suit with a white shirt and a red tie and a carnation, and he would come in. He was very nice. So I just went to him. I said, "Will you teach me?" Just like this. I'm 5 years old. Talk about chutzpah, Jewish, Russian shit, right?
Yeah.
And he's really Sicilian. You know what I'm saying? Not even Italian, just like heavy. So he looked at me and he said, "My father's standing there." And he said, "Okay." Look, he needs money too, okay? So we went upstairs. He had a studio upstairs in McDonald Avenue. He had a beautiful Steinway and rugs and records and books. Believe me, I never saw anything like that. In Brooklyn, we had a TV and they had a bar in my house, and that was it. There's no culture. You know what I'm saying? It was a television, man.
Yeah, that's it. I love
So
it.
he started teaching me, and he was so old school. Because remember, he was 60 in 1954, right? And I'm like 5, 6, 7. Okay, so he says, "So play something for me, my son." It was my son, and he was a master. None of this friendly shit, right?
Right.
I said, "I can't play. I can't play anything." He said, "What?" I said, "No, I want you to teach me." He said, "You can't read music?" I said, "No, master, I'm sorry." So he looked at me like you look at a piece of shit on your shoe. You know what I'm saying? And I just looked at him. I said, "Please teach me. I'll do anything you say." I really knew. I don't know how I knew when I was 5, but I knew. And he said, "Okay, this is a treble clef, this is a bass clef, blah, blah, blah. Mozart, little baby pieces." I was overjoyed. I went home and I practiced, and I had a little piece of shit of a white piano with 4 octaves. My parents didn't have so much money. They didn't want to spend money on a piano because I could have told them I want to be a football player next week, right? So I played this piano all day. I cut school. I would come home for lunch and stay, and at night it was amazing. I would be studying the music with a flashlight under the covers. My father came in. He thought I was jerking off. He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm studying the music." He was very, very disappointed, right? So anyway, I learned from him, and then I became his son. Because my father didn't talk to me very much because he was burnt from World War II. All the friends that he enlisted with, he landed on Omaha Beach on D-Day in the second wave. So all his friends died, like in front of his face, coming out of the boat, you know. So he was like in shock for 20 years. I didn't really talk to my father until I was 40, and then we became best friends. But anyway, I had this teacher who became my second father, and then it was once a week, and then it was 3 times a week, and then I was going into New York. But he was so hard, Jake. This was hard. That's why I was ready to stand and sit, and George Coleman and all these motherfuckers that teach like with a whip, you know. And he, if I played well, he would hug me, give me a kiss. If I didn't, he smacked me on the back of the head. Stunad. I remember that word, you know. It means asshole.
Stunad.
Stunad. It means asshole in Sicilian.
Oh, this is unbelievable.
He would be in fucking jail now. Just, you know, so.
Absolutely.
But he loved me, and I studied with him until I was 18. Only classical music. He hated jazz. Hated. I once put on the Milestones record, the Red Garland, the Billy Boy, you know. Da, da, ba, 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 da, ba. I loved that. I went nuts. I put it on. I said, "Master, listen to this. Isn't it great?" He heard like 4 bars. He said, "Take that off and don't ever talk to me again about that music." He said, "That's not for you." So I knew I couldn't talk to him about that. And then he died. I was 18, and I went to his funeral, and he was happy because I was accepted at Manhattan School and Juilliard as a classical pianist. But by then, I was 18. I was already playing with Dave Liebman and Randy, and we would go to sessions in New York. We went to Birdland, and I just couldn't tell him to break his heart that I didn't want to play concert music because I didn't like it. I didn't like it. Hold on a second. Yo, what's happening? Anyway, sorry.
No problem.
What I'm saying is, what I'm saying, everything's fine. What I'm saying is my father and my teacher prepared me. It was like a master's and a doctorate, because when I went with Stan, Stan and Chet and Freddie Hubbard and Joe Henn, and then Dave Liebman and Jack DeJohnette and then my peers. But by then I was used to that shit, and Stitt was the most abusive motherfucker ever. And also a great guy, brilliant guy. There's some argument to say that he really was the one that put the shit on Bird. That's why he played tenor, because he got tired of being. Everybody said, "Oh, you copied Bird." He was exactly the same age as Bird, and he was brilliant. And he had his own way of playing. But anyway, he was a very frustrated man. Of course, all the black cats of that time couldn't stay in the same fucking hotels as you know what I'm saying. I'll never forget. I was playing in North Carolina with Stan, with Jack and Dave Holland. It was 1973, and Duke Ellington was playing in the hotel, and we were playing also. We opened for him because Duke, amazing, and Duke could stay in the hotel. He had the suite, and Stan and all of us, but the rest of the band had to go to another hotel. Do you know what I'm saying? Like
Absolutely.
Whitewater. This is 1973 in North Carolina, and I couldn't believe it. And Stan said, "That's the way it is,"
No,
And
I mean
said,
that's.
"This is good."
That was when I know Big Black, the percussionist. He said that they had a bill going on, the Duke Ellington big band, and then the average white band. And the average white band got $90,000, and I think Duke got about $20,000.
Right.
Really.
Same thing happened with yes.
Yeah. No, I mean just vicious.
Go ahead.
No, I just think it shows. It was very overt racism. It was not covert. It wasn't shielded.
That's right.
It was overt, right in your face.
That's exactly right. And it was no such thing as politically correct then. Right?
That's right.
It was
That's right.
Like, do what you wanted. I was always amazed, like, how those cats did it, And I remember once, there was no black musician in the New York Philharmonic until Richard Davis came. Richard played.
Absolutely.
And I saw it on TV. Stravinsky was alive. He came. He was old like a motherfucker. He came and he conducted the Rite of Spring, right? And Leonard Bernstein was there and very happy, and it was an amazing performance of the Rite of Spring. And Richard Davis was one of the bass players. And you know how Richard, beautiful face with a big smile, played unbelievably great, by the way. And so the audience was great. Stravinsky was great. And the bass, the section was in the back on the right, just before you went backstage to go out. So I'll never forget this, man. Stravinsky is walking slowly to the back, and he looks at Richard Davis, and he goes and he stops and puts his hand on his shoulder, just like that, for like 5 seconds, and walked away. It was amazing. It was an amazing moment because Stravinsky, the old Russian motherfucker, right, was acknowledging Richard Davis as the only black person in the band. You know what I'm saying? So I saw a lot of shit like that because I'm 69, and I'm kind of not old enough to be with the old cats, and I'm definitely not with the young cats. But the important thing about Stan, and not just Stan, because Miles is very similar. Miles was just a grandmother. I mean, he was like fantastic when you were alone with him, just one-to-one. He was like more than kind. He was like avuncular, like grandma. You want something to eat, or you're cold, this shit. But then you go someplace else where he's around other people. You go, who the fuck are you, kid? Right? It was amazing cultural implosion because nobody knew what to do, because the black music, the black musicians mostly created the music, not because they wanted to, but because they were not allowed into the white world. It's very simple,
Absolutely.
And so
you're
right?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So then the culture, you have all these incredible black geniuses, but then, of course, you have Stan Getz, you have Bill Evans, you have Lee Konitz, you have Jerry Mulligan, you have these geniuses that happen to be white that are in the black world. And Stan, Stan went through a lot of shit because his man was Lester Young. Anybody that knows Stan knows that Stan's God was Lester Young. And his main competition was Sonny Rollins and John Coltrane. And he would talk about that. We would talk sometimes because, when you're on the road, there's no more barriers. There's no black, white, young bullshit. It's just like you're with the guy 24 hours a day, right?
Right.
And he would tell me, we would just ask him, Dave Holland would say, so Stan, what happened? What happened with you and Chad? Or some amazing shit, right? Which I can't even talk to you about, really.
Mm-hmm.
But just like, and this is not gossip. This is not bullshit, bravado. This is a cultural icon talking about history, and it hasn't been codified yet because there's so many politically incorrect things in it. You know what I'm saying? But
could you just say one? I mean, I think this is really. I mean, can you just try to give me? This is so important because we're talking about a guy who spans a century. I mean, really, a luminary figure in history, talking about history in not a politically correct way. I mean, is there anything that you can share? It would really be wonderful.
I have to think about that, but
well, let me ask you. Can I tracing it back to Russia? Where did that sort of compliance, that self-assuredness, even if you didn't know anything, that chutzpah, that lack of questioning, where did that come from within going all the way back to Russia, the Jewish Russian culture? Where did that come from with Stan?
Think about Jews in Russia. Think about the oppression. Think about the amazing purges. Think about history. Think about being a Jew in Soviet Russia, right?
Yeah, not a cup of tea.
Thing.
No, not so. Okay.
Not a cup of tea.
Yeah, right.
So from that, either you get wiped out, or you were resilient and intelligent and street smart, and you can live. You're living from day to day, and it makes you hard and a certain way, impervious to shit, and it gives you a sense of value, relative values. How bad is bad? Well, is somebody bad is if their swimming pool gets dirty. It's a terrible disaster, right? They can't go on, right? Oh my God, my swimming pool! I can't help. Oh, there's 2 pieces of bread. They don't fit. I'm gonna kill myself, right?
Right.
But this is like you get that knock on the door at 3 a.m, and they take you away, and you can't be Rambo. There's no hero. You got 3 guys with machine guns. What are you gonna do? Nothing. You have to go, and persecution's a whole other thing. We don't even know about that. But Stan's American, okay? I mean, yeah, background is one thing, but he's American. And in the best sense of the word, he's American. Culturally deprived, total arrogant chip, the ugly American chip on the shoulder like the Empire State Building. But dig it. He needed that to exist in the jazz world. He was accepted by everybody, black, white. Go look at the old downbeats, interviews with Dexter Gordon and John Coltrane. And then Leonard Feather would say, so who are some of your favorites and influences? Train and Dexter would say, Stan Getz. Of course, not first. It would be Coleman Hawkins, Lester Young, and Stan Getz. They liked him. It was cross-cultural. It was cross-races. Had nothing to do with money. Now, you got to remember, Stan was already successful. He was 16 playing Woody Herman, 16-year-old boy. Okay? I'm talking about
a boy.
Like
a boy.
A boy with a natural genius that he had no idea where it came from. He didn't practice. He had it. And this is a genius like Yehudi Menuhin or young prodigy shit where they don't know why they can hear. They don't know why they can create. They just do it perfectly in tune, perfectly in time. When you want to have a comparison, look at Michael Brecker and look at Stan Getz. Now, Michael was a practicer, but they both were instrumental geniuses. Sound. I mean, the 3 most recognizable sounds in jazz is Miles Davis with the mute and the trumpet playing Funny Valentine, right?
Yep.
John Coltrane, Stan Getz, the sound. Forget about what he's playing. Lush Life, Ipanema, don't mean shit. His sound, it enclosed you because you can't get away from a sound. You can turn off the TV, but the sound, it just envelops you. And when I sat down at the piano and he was standing in front of me every night, Lush Life, I Remember Clifford, Spring is Here, the ballads were monumental. It was like a Mahler symphony. I'm telling you, Jake, I used to get chills. I couldn't believe it. And he fucked the audience completely up. The men looking down, crying, don't want the girls to see it. Women looking up at him, weeping, smiling. Everybody wanted to fuck him, okay? And then, no, I'm telling you, I saw it.
No, I know he was, the idea of the men being humbled into crying, I know he was a womanizer, but go ahead, yeah, continue. That's the other part of it is that Woody Woody identified him and would point to him because he knew how to bring the audience to him,
Totally. He had that, and nobody knew how he learned it. Where did he learn it? He had a magnetism about him. Was he an asshole sometimes? Terrible. Was he Mandela sometimes? Yes. He was everything. He was total complicated. But the only thing that's really relevant, now here's the interesting thing. He became the most famous saxophone player in the world for a while with the girl from Ipanema. Jake, this was not the number one jazz record. This was the number one record in the world.
It knocked
the
Beatles off the pop charts. It knocked them off the
Beatles
off the pop charts.
That fucking song, which I can't even listen to without getting sick for some reason. it was an accident. It was an accident. And the horrible thing was that he didn't make any money from the royalties because he didn't write shit. He just played on it. It was very amazing. But it made his name in every mafia jukebox, in every bar in Queens, and all across the world in the country was the girl from Ipanema. And with his solo, beep, bum, bum, beep, 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 bum, bum. I mean, compared to his other music or compared to A Love Supreme, it's ridiculous. But the level of fame that he had. Now, remember, his Russian background, his Russian-American background, his nervous system. He had a small-town nervous system like Elvis.
I love that.
Elvis had no nervous system prepared for worldwide fame. That's why he went nuts. That's why he medicated himself. He bought Mercedes for a waiter. He didn't understand. He was talented, sure. These people that have this incredible gift, it's a curse. Sometimes they blow up. They burn out. They can't deal. Why? They say, why? Look, when everybody's telling you you're a genius and it's amazing and you don't know how you do it, that kind of feeling? It's like falling down the stairs. You don't know what's happening. Look, I'm not a fucking genius. I'm a worker. So was Coltrane, by the way, and Bill Evans and Miles. Late bloomers. Miles sounded like shit when he sat in with Philly Joe. They threw a cymbal at him. Practice, perfect, okay? But no, Tony Williams was 16, playing revolutionizing the drums. Mozart was 6, writing amazing shit right away. The prodigy in Stan worked for him and against him, and he made some. After all the dust settled, after all the biographies, after all the politically incorrect shit, it really don't matter because you put the record on, you stop reading the line notes, you don't look at the picture. His sound and what he played will last. And these things are interesting because they are culturally important, just the way what was the interaction with Bach and Haydn or Beethoven and Tchaikovsky. These things, they're important to us, but not the world. But I think it's important what you're doing because if you know something about the person's personality and his interaction with the world, I think you can enjoy his music more. That's the whole that's why I think you're doing all this shit, right?
Well, I think I cannot believe how you're like in the alpha state right now. This to me is like
I'm rolling, bro.
No, but you mentioned a couple times about like he wasn't like it wasn't a formulaic educational. He wasn't formally educated. He wasn't an intellectual in the sense of getting a PhD. But he was. I mean, I know that he had chops. He was a voracious reader. He was, I mean, he was a smart dude. He just was more of a street scholar. I mean, this to me was like the part of him that,
That's
like,
right.
you know, where you said Brecker practiced a lot. Stan never practiced. He threw Joao Gilberto out of his house because Gilberto wanted to do the same tune 30 times in a row. He threw him out.
I know.
But I mean, if you, I want Beirach to go into your bag here. If you were gonna compare Stan to a poet because of his lyricism, because of the lines that he would riff on, what kind of poet would you, or even and then the easier one would be, if you would compare him to an artist from another medium. Mozart obviously is the obvious musical comparison, but if there was a sculptor or a painter, or even a poet, who would you?
I have a good one.
Yeah.
Jackson Pollock.
Why?
Because total intuitive, completely intuitive. Didn't know how, didn't know why. You know those famous drip paintings, those magnificent paintings that are in the Museum of Modern Art?
Oh, yeah.
The Autumn Rhythm and the Blue Poles. It was an accident because he was an alcoholic and he was painting. Finally, he stopped putting canvases up. He put them on the floor. So instead of bending over and breaking his back to paint it, he just threw the fucking paint. He dripped the paint and created these amazing layers of masterpieces that gave you a sense of the universe moving around, and it was completely non-representation. It was totally abstract. I mean, it was not even a late impressionist of smudge looking like a tree. He didn't want it to look like anything. This is the height of the American art form, abstract expressionism. And there's a big link between Coltrane and Pollock because of the free music of Coltrane at the end, not at the beginning. But Stan, in a sense, not musically, because Stan was very conservative musically, in a way. But his genius, he worked within the boundaries, within an 8-bar tune, within the simple melody, within rhythm changes. He could create like a cathedral. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And he had that possibility, and so did Miles and Bill. Train and Stan were very, very similar for a long time. If you listen to early Coltrane, and Stan's basic unit of measurement was the 8th note and the 16th note and the quarter note. And Coltrane was 32nd note and the 64th note. They just went up levels and levels and levels, just in terms of the surface. But Stan was a complete musician in his own small world. You know, Bill Evans told me one thing. We're talking about Monk. I was talking about Monk and Oscar Peterson. And he said, you know, anybody can be a genius, sound like a genius, if they know their limitations. Think about that. Did Monk ever try and play any fast shit? No. Did he ever try and play these double-time lines? No. Monk played what he played. He improvised in the same style that he wrote those brilliant melodies. So it was great. He didn't try and fuck around and you know, fall on these double-time things. And look at Oscar. Oscar, the most fluent of all, right? Did he ever try and play percussively like Monk? No, he didn't want it. Stan knew his world. He knew up and down. And it was all on the job, training and experience. He knew how to work an audience. He knew how to work an audience without being corny. He'd look in the front row and he would know what the people needed. He would know. He was very in contact with the audience. It was not like he was Miles. Miles was scared of the audience. He turned his back, distracted the motherfucker. Stan loved the audience because they loved him. Before he started to play a note, they loved him.
Now,
it's amazing.
Can you like compare his demeanor, stage presence with guys like Cannon and Diz? Because those guys were very amiable with the audience. Like Miles obviously was very antisocial, but like Cannon and talk about Stan.
Sure.
What he, I know like David Friesen talked about, it was really, he learned how to be a professional musician on the bandstand in the sense that Stan would have everybody bow to the audience. I mean, there was a formal thing there, but I know that Stan also, when he was all coked up, he could talk for hours, might only play 2 tunes.
Yeah. Stan, Cannonball was high school teacher, brilliant, great teacher.
Florida, yep.
Very straight ahead. No drugs, no girls, no whores. He loved music, him and his brother. And he was intellectual. He was a black intellectual. Intelligent, well-read, well-spoken, but still a funky, big, fat motherfucker. A genius, right? So what he did with the audiences, why they loved him, he would get up there without being an Uncle Tom, without sucking them, he would say, "Hey, how you all doing?" And like an entertainer would in Vegas, and then he would play some amazing shit. So he kind of not tricked them, but he was great with large audience. And then, of course, he had the Mercy Mercy and Work Song. He found those blues-based things, right? And he loved those tunes, and the people went nuts. It gave them something to listen to. By the way, Ray Charles had the first Wurlitzer, electric piano on What I Say. And then very soon after that was Zapparoo with the other Wurlitzer, with Mercy Mercy, right? Wow. So this is the beginning of the crossover shit. But if you want to hear Cannonball, the essence of Cannonball, you listen to his solo on the Milestones record. That amazing solo. You could sing it. It's like Mozart, right? Like a Mozart aria. Cannon had the alto. He had the first new alto sound after Charlie Parker and Lee Konitz, right? Charlie Parker had the sound, the hard, double-time, genius, asymmetrical shit that was just impossible. It was new. Nobody could understand it, except Dizzy, of course. And then you had Lee Konitz with a very soft, like a kind of a pillow sound, which was lovely. And Paul Desmond was the commercial face of that with the Take 5 shit. But think about Cannonball, man, coming in after Bird, a new sound. In a certain way, Cannonball was the first of the new alto sounds that spawned Kenny Garrett and Sonny Fortune. But Cannon had a big personality. He would count off a tune. It would take him like a minute to count off the tune. He'd make circles, 1, 2. And by the 8th bar, everybody in the audience is clapping. It was amazing. Wow. That band with Cannonball, with Sam Jones, Billy Higgins.
Louis Hayes, maybe?
Louis Hayes. Yeah. Louis Hayes and his brother. That was amazing. And Zavanu, white guy from Vienna. Yeah, right. Amazing.
Right.
Dizzy was... see, look, there's different ways. There's classical and there's developmental. Dizzy and Monk and Bill Evans were not developmental artists. They found their genius and stayed with it and refined it, and it was great. But Train and Miles and Monet and Beethoven and Picasso were developmental geniuses. They had periods. They moved on. Coltrane came out with the Giant Steps and then Favorite Things and then Love Supreme, and then he even left that. He left that and went to some other amazing shit. Picasso had the blue period and the red period. Monet started out portraits. Then he found his genre was the water lilies. He painted just the water. It's amazing. Beethoven started out sounding like Mozart, right? He ended up revolutionizing the entire sonata form. The last sonata, the 32nd sonata, it's 2 movements. 2 movements instead of the 4 movements with the waltz and the march and that shit, right?
Was Stan a developmental? Was he a developmental genius?
Stan, no, he was not. He was the classic genius. Classic. Now, look, I'm not making a value judgment. I'm not saying...
No, this is important. I want you to go with it. Go.
Yeah, I'm saying that it's a just different type of a approach to life. Bill came out with his shit in 1956, 57, 1961, And he stayed with it and refined it. Fantastic. Sonny Rollins never changed. He just changed his side. Miles. Think about the 3 Miles quintets. The first one with Red and Paul Chambers and those guys. The second one with Tony and Wayne and Herbie. And the last one with Jack and Chick, Dave Holland, and pick a saxophone player, right? And after that, he went somewhere else. But those were 3 iconic groups that changed the world of jazz each time. Plus Kind of Blue, which was just the greatest jazz record of all time, in a certain way. All first takes except one. Miles is totally developmental. Coltrane, totally developmental. Beethoven, Monet, Picasso. Dizzy was not developmental. Found one thing, developed it, refined it. Yes, Stan also. Listen, in the last couple of years of his life, Stan was playing very similar tunes. Similar way. It's okay. A steak is a steak is a steak is a steak. A red wine is a red wine. It's a red wine.
Well, I even look at it. I'm looking at this. These time periods. He just was not. Even in the 70s, it was a Chick Corea Song Fest. Richie Beirach song, Dave Holland song fest. I mean, I would argue that
that's right.
He won 4 Grammy Awards. Samba de Soco, that solo won.
Yeah.
And he kind of just after that was like, I mean, I kind of just rested on that. I mean, he was still prodigious in his sound and his lyricism, time feel, but you're right. He didn't keep creating new material per se.
Here's the other thing. He didn't read music very well, and he couldn't write anything. He never wrote anything. Like Chet, never wrote anything. So he was always dependent on people to write for him. Piano players, me. Chick wrote a whole book for him. The Captain Marvel, all that shit, right?
Times Lie.
And that Times Lie, yeah, right.
Ridiculous.
And he stand actually ridiculous. And then the record with Finnegan, Sawtef Finnegan Band.
Oh yeah, Focus.
That Focus. Genius.
Well, that is the crowning.
Stan look at the music? Did he look at the music when he was playing? No, I heard stories from Johnny Carisi. He just went in and did it by ear. Right. Infallible ear. Infallible. Like,
because that's what Mel Martin I was talking to yesterday. He said that he called up and asked for the couple of saxophone transcriptions on Focus, and they said there are none. It was all done. It was all done. It was all improvised right at the spot.
That's right. And who else could do that besides Stan?
Nobody.
Maybe Chet?
Yeah, I don't know.
Not like that.
Right.
Listen, I had Chet in my house, and I wrote Leaving when I was with him at Broken Wing, and I didn't know. He could read changes, but he couldn't really read music, plus he was too high. Sorry. He said, Richie, play it. So I played it. He said, play it again. I played it again. And then he proceeded to play Leaving perfectly, but not even just perfectly, better than me. And I wrote it. He understood the emotion in the tune. He understood what the notes meant. And those are complicated fucking changes. They're not easy 2/5 changes. His ear, unbelievable. And Stan, like you were saying, Stan would play Dave Holland's music. On the record that came out with me and Jack and Dave live at the Left Bank Jazz Society, there's a tune on there from Dave Holland called Cosmosis, which is about 400 on the metronome, so unbelievably fast, up-tempo, with very hard changes.
Right.
I had to study those changes, right?
Right.
And I was a young cat, right? Stan just looked at it, and Dave said, well, you want to look at it? He said, nah. And he played. Now, he didn't just jerk off on it or smudge it.
Yeah.
He played in the chords. So, and I'm sure he didn't know what the name of the chords were, but this is a different kind of genius. That's not me. I have to know what I'm doing. Then I can be creative.
No, you're nailing it. What kind of? You're telling me that's? Are you telling me that his kind of genius is considered classical genius? I mean, that genius.
Classical, yes, absolute classical genius. He happened to be a jazz musician, but his instrumental virtuosity and command of the horn, and his command of time and phrasing and playing in the rhythm section and playing with Jack and Dave, he could play a whole set just with the bass. Never got lost. Never turned the time around once. in 3 years. Never. This is some other shit. And we challenged him. We were some young cocksuckers, and we pushed his ass, and we wanted to play complicated shit. And he loves it because, of course, from his ego, he wanted to seem like a young man. So can he keep up with the young guys? He was killing it. The way Miles was killing it. Miles was leading that band.
Did he?
And everybody's saying Tony and Wayne. Miles was playing some of the greatest shit of all.
Oh, you look at some of the video of him right after or right before Beirach and Getz started collaborating with Tony and Stanley and Chick and those guys are trying to do the same thing. They're trying to light a fire under his ass, and he's just staying right with them. He's not phased at all.
He's staying right with them, and he's not struggling at all.
He's having a ball. He's having a ball. He's having a ball.
He never struggled for a minute. Never a minute. I never saw him struggle. I saw him drunk a couple of times. It was difficult to walk on the bandstand, but he was his presence, man. He was like a president or head of state. He had that shit. He was like, when Obama walked into the room, you got a vibe. He was not really very spiritual, because he liked girls, he liked drugs, he liked to eat.
He was sitting all the time. Yeah, no, but he was not a shaman, but he was the head of state is a very interesting. I have one final question for you because we have.
I have to go, but go ahead.
No, one final question. You guys, it wasn't that it wasn't like you were talking to your father. You guys were able to get down on deep levels because you shot the shit.
Yeah.
Can you just talk about what made Stan truly insecure and drove him crazy in life in general?
Yes. The main thing that I saw that made him crazy and freaked him is if he walked into a place and they didn't know he was Stan Getz. He hated that because he had this amazing career and then the incredible exaggerated fame of the girl from Ipanema. So he would walk in to some place and every hotel, big hotel, they knew him. They said, Mr. Getz, we have the suite for you. He loved that shit. Or he'd walk backstage and the sound guy would say, Mr. Getz. He said, call me Stan, right? But then we worked some small towns in Europe or in Italy or even in America, and we stayed in a nice place, but like it was maybe a fancy Howard Johnson or a Hilton, and the guy at the desk didn't know shit. And he said, name, please? And he would say, I'm Stan Getz. Like who the fuck are you supposed to know who I am, right? It was crazy. It was amazing.
Hey,
I'll tell you one really nice story.
Go ahead.
We played the Apollo with the quartet, 1973. Up
badass.
In Harlem, right?
So badass. Oh my God, that's badass.
And there was all kinds of. Elvin Jones was playing with his band, with Liebman and Grossman.
Perla was on bass.
Perla.
Grossman, fucking maniacs. Those
Grossman
guys.
and crazy, right? And then there was a bunch of another great band. It was like a George Wein Festival in Apollo, some shit. And I walked, and Stan came in, and there was a lot of musicians backstage, and he hadn't been around for a while, Stan, and they just started to applaud him. They just started, like the musicians, giving him a fucking round of applause, right? He loved it. He went nuts. He was melting. He loved it. He loved to be famous. But his nervous system eventually brought him down because in the end, I'm sure, I don't know this for a fact, but I'm sure he would ask himself, how did I do this? Why me? You know what I'm saying? Even if it was great.
No, absolutely. I've talked to his kids enough to know that he was baffled as to how these things, why they became hits. Yeah.
Genius.
Baffled by his own genius. Beirach, you did it again. Go have a nightcap or whatever. Go play some Chet Baker, and we'll be in touch, brother. Much love. Much love.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Jack.
Cheers. Bye-bye. We just heard from Gregorico from Sly and the Family Stone, and now Richie Beirach, the legendary pianist who played with Stan Getz. I'll be back tomorrow with Huey Lewis, among others. For now, we will rejoin the Jim Parisi Show on Power Talk.
Sort of news of the weird, too. All right, Trump's headline. Drudge headline says